My sister's voice was steady, almost practiced like she'd rehearsed it in the car on the way here. She's mentally unstable after she got out, Your Honor. She can't manage her own affairs. She's confused, impulsive, and a danger to herself. That was the moment I knew Lindsay didn't just want my money. She wanted a story, a clean one. One where she was the brave big sister stepping in to save me, and I was the broken veteran who needed supervision. We were in the probate court, the kind of room that smells like old paper and stale coffee. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, a flag in the corner that looked like it hadn't moved since 2003. The judge sat up high, calm, and tired, like she'd seen every family version of, "I'm only doing this because I care." Behind Lindsay, my relatives filled the back rows. Aunts, cousins, people who hadn't checked on me once after I got out, but somehow found time to take a morning off work to watch me get labeled in public. They didn't come because they were worried about me. They came for the show. Lindsay stood there in a conservative dress, hands folded, voice, soft eyes, just shiny enough to be believable. Her lawyer, Evan Pritchard, kept his face neutral, like he was reading ingredients off a cereal box. My dad sat beside Lindsay, nodding like a dashboard bobblehead. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. Lindsay had been speaking for him for years. I sat at the other table with my legal clinic attorney, Sloan Mercer. Sloan didn't do dramatic. She did careful. Her file was stacked. Tabs everywhere. Sticky notes. Highlighter marks. The kind of organization that makes liars sweat. I didn't look at my relatives. I didn't look at my dad. I didn't even look at Lindsay. I watched the judge. Judge Morrison, short hair, reading glasses, a pen that tapped once every few seconds when she was annoyed. Lindsay kept going. Since she got out, she's been different. She isolates. She forgets basic things. She's had trouble sleeping. She can't hold a job. She's let the estate funds drain without taking any action. We're asking for an emergency conservatorship to protect her and protect what's left. Emergency conservatorship. That phrase always makes it sound like someone is standing on a ledge. Like they're about to jump, and the family hero is reaching out to pull them back. In real life, it usually means someone wants your keys, your bank access, your signature, your freedom. Judge Morrison glanced down at the paperwork. "Miss Caldwell," she said, looking at Lindsay, "you're petitioning to be appointed temporary conservator for your sister Maris Caldwell based on mental incapacity and financial mismanagement. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Lindsay said, like she was answering a question in Sunday school. Evan slid a stack of papers forward. "We're also submitting account records from the estate disbursement account. There has been a significant depletion over the last several months, and Ms. Caldwell has failed to report any fraud or take steps to stop it." Lindsay turned slightly, just enough to let the court see her face. "I'm not trying to punish her. I'm trying to protect her. After she got out, she hasn't been herself. I'm scared she'll end up homeless or worse." There it was again. After she got out. She said it like it was a diagnosis. Like veteran was the same thing as unreliable. Like adjusting to civilian life was proof you couldn't think straight. I wanted to laugh. Not because it was funny, because it was so predictable. Lindsay was counting on something simple. If I reacted, I'd prove her point. If I got angry, I was unstable. If I cried, I was unstable. If I defended myself too hard, I was unstable. If I sat there quiet, I was shut down. There was no version where I won on emotion. So I didn't pay her in emotion. I paid her in silence. Judge Morrison looked at me. "Ms. Caldwell, she said your sister has made serious allegations. Do you understand what she's requesting?" I lifted my chin slightly. "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you believe you need a conservator?" "No." Lindsay's mouth tightened for half a second. Her eyes flicked toward the back row. She wanted my family to see me crack. She wanted them to whisper, "See, she's not okay." Judge Morrison flipped a page. "Mr. Pritchard, you mentioned a significant depletion. How much are we talking about?" Evan cleared his throat. "Approximately $240,000, Your Honor." A sound moved through the gallery. Not quite a gasp, more like a collective inhale. My Aunt Denise actually made a little choking noise, like she'd swallowed a grape wrong. 240,000. To them, that was a lottery win. To Lindsay, it was a shopping list. Lindsay jumped in fast. "She didn't even notice, Your Honor. No police report, no fraud alert, nothing. She's just checked out. And she's easily manipulated. That's why I'm here, before someone takes advantage of her." That part almost made me smile. Because she was saying it out loud without realizing what she was admitting. Before someone takes advantage of her, like she wasn't already. Judge Morrison's pen stopped tapping. She looked down at the records again, then back at Lindsay. These transfers, she said carefully, were they paper checks or electronic? Electronic, Evan said. ACH transfers and online payments. Judge Morrison nodded slowly. And what notifications were set up on the account? Evan hesitated. Just a beat. Not long enough for a normal person to notice, but long enough for someone who's been lied to her whole life to recognize it. Standard paperless statements, Your Honor, he said. Email alerts. Judge Morrison leaned forward slightly. Whose email? Lindsay answered too quickly. My sister's. Judge Morrison didn't look at me. She looked at the file. Then she looked at Lindsay again, and her voice got very plain. Who set up the paperless alerts? The room shifted in a way I could feel in my ribs. Evan's hand froze over his legal pad like someone had hit pause on him. Lindsay blinked hard once like she was buffering. My dad sat up straighter, as if posture could fix what was coming. And I stayed exactly where I was. Calm, still, quiet. Because that question wasn't small. It wasn't random. It was the kind of question you ask when you already see the outline of the truth, and you just need someone to walk into it on the record. Lindsay opened her mouth, then shut it. Her eyes flicked to Evan. Evan didn't move. He stared at the judge like he was trying to read her mind. Judge Morrison waited. No rush. No theatrics. Just silence, the kind that makes liars start talking too much. Lindsay finally forced a smile. I helped her, Your Honor. After she got out, she was overwhelmed. I was just trying to make sure she didn't miss anything. That's when I looked at her for the first time. Not with anger, not with hurt. With the kind of neutral stare you give someone who's about to step on a rake they left on the ground. Judge Morrison nodded once like she'd heard exactly what she needed. I didn't speak. I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct her. I let her keep talking. Because the best part about court is that people think they're telling a story. They forget they're building a record. And Lindsay had no idea what she'd just put on that record. Right then, as the judge's eyes dropped back to the file, and Evan's face lost a shade of color, I made a quick decision. Judge Morrison lifted her gaze again. Ms. Caldwell, she said, and this time she meant me. I'm going to ask you directly. Do you have any documentation regarding account access alert settings or changes to contact information? Sloane's hand moved calm and precise, sliding a thin blue folder closer to me. Not a stack, not a binder, just one folder. The kind you bring when you don't need extra paper to sound important. I didn't open it yet. I didn't stand up yet. I looked at Lindsay, then at Evan, and then back at the judge. Yes, Your Honor, I said. My voice was steady normal, like I was ordering a coffee. I do. And across the courtroom, Lindsay's smile finally started to slip. Not because she felt guilty, but because she was realizing there was a version of this hearing she hadn't planned for. I slid the blue folder open just enough to feel the edge of the first page under my fingertips. Then I closed it again, not because I was scared, because I wasn't giving Lindsay the satisfaction of watching me scramble. Judge Morrison's eyes stayed on me. Ms. Caldwell, she said, before you present anything, I want to understand how your sister became involved with the account in the first place. Lindsay's shoulders loosened like she'd been thrown a rope. This was her favorite part: context. The part where she could paint herself as the savior and me as the mess. She leaned forward, soft voice ready. After she got out, she wasn't doing well. She was overwhelmed. She didn't know where to start. So I stepped in. Sloane didn't look at Lindsay. She looked at me just for a second. Not a warning. More like permission. I exhaled through my nose. Your Honor. I said I can answer that. Judge Morrison nodded once. Go ahead. I didn't turn to the gallery. I stared straight ahead at the seal on the wall behind the judge, and I let my mind go to the first week I'd been home. I got out in late spring. My contract ended. My gear got turned in. My final signatures got stamped, and suddenly I was just a person again. No schedule being handed to me. No one checking where I was. No formations. No roll call. The freedom sounds great until you realize you're the one who has to build the structure from scratch. The first morning back, I woke up at 4:47 a.m., like my body didn't get the memo. I lay there staring at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom. The same beige walls, the same cheap dresser, the same little crack in the corner by the window. Downstairs, I could hear my mom moving around. Coffee, cabinets, that familiar clink of a spoon on a mug. I walked into the kitchen, and she looked at me like she was trying to decide if I was still her daughter or a stranger in a familiar face. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said. That was the beginning of it. Everyone kept asking if I was okay, and I kept saying yes, and nobody knew what to do with that. Lindsay showed up that afternoon like she was arriving for a shift at work. She didn't knock. She never did. She walked in holding a grocery bag and a smile that looked kind from far away. "There she is," she said loud enough for my dad to hear in the living room. "Our brave little soldier." I wasn't little. Lindsay was 2 years older than me and had been calling me that since we were kids. It wasn't affectionate. It was a way to keep me in a box where she felt taller. She hugged me with one arm and patted my shoulder like I was a charity case. Then she looked at my mom and sighed dramatically. "You haven't even started the paperwork yet, have you?" she said. My mom blinked. "What paperwork?" Lindsay lifted the grocery bag like she was unveiling evidence. "I brought folders," she said, "for the estate, for her benefits, for everything she needs to get her life together, because someone has to." I remember standing there thinking, she didn't come to see me. She came to manage me, and I was tired. Not I didn't sleep tired, more like my brain has been on duty for years, and now everyone expects it to be cheerful and chatty tired. So when Lindsay started talking about forms, it was easier to let her. A week later, my grandmother died. It wasn't a surprise. She'd been sick. But the timing felt cruel, like life was testing whether I could handle being home. The funeral was packed. People I hadn't seen in years showed up wearing sympathy like a costume. Lindsay floated through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting condolences like she'd lost a spouse instead of a grandmother. After the service, there was a family meeting in my parents' dining room. That's what Lindsay called it. She printed an agenda. I'm not kidding, an actual agenda. She sat at the head of the table, like she was the judge. My dad sat next to her, nodding again. My mom poured sweet tea and kept her eyes down. Lindsay explained the estate like she had a law degree. She didn't. She worked in real estate admin and acted like that made her the CFO of the family. "There's an estate account for disbursements," she said. "Funeral costs, legal fees, distribution. Someone has to keep it organized. Maris is in no shape to do this alone." I wasn't in no shape. I was quiet. That was my crime. I tried to speak. Lindsay cut me off like she was swatting a fly. After she got out, she told everyone she's been overwhelmed. She's not sleeping. She forgets things. She needs help. My dad cleared his throat. "Your sister's just trying to help." Lindsay finished for him. Always help. That word was her whole brand. The next few weeks became a blur of papers. Mail coming in, bills, condolence cards, a probate attorney's office calling with questions that made my head ache. I was trying to apply for jobs, trying to figure out my next steps, trying to get my life moving without tripping over my own feet. Lindsay offered to take things off my plate. She said it with a smile. She said it like she cared, but she wanted control. And she was good at finding moments where saying no made you look unreasonable. One afternoon, she showed up with her laptop, and my mom's kitchen table turned into her command center. "Okay," she said, tapping the screen. "We're going to set up paperless statements so you don't miss anything." "I can do it," I said. She waved a hand. "Maris, stop. Just let me. After you got out, you've been scatterbrained. No offense." "No offense is what people say right before they offend you." She asked for my phone. I handed it over because I didn't feel like arguing. She asked for my email password, and I said no. She laughed like I was being cute. "You don't trust your own sister?" she asked, loud enough for my mom to hear. My mom looked up, instantly anxious. "Maris," Lindsay sighed. "Fine. I'll create a separate email for the estate stuff. Something simple. You'll have access." She typed fast. Too fast. I watched her fingers like they had a life of their own. She handed my phone back and said, "All done." Then came the signatures. Some were normal. Estate release forms. Acknowledgements. Things you sign when someone dies, and you want the world to keep spinning. Lindsay would slide a page in front of me, point to a line and say, "Just sign." This is standard. I read some of them. I didn't read all. Not because I was careless, because I was trying to survive a month where everything felt heavy, and everyone expected me to be grateful for help. One day, Lindsay put a packet in front of me with a yellow sticky note that said, "Sign here," in big black letters. She was talking while I signed, filling the air with noise so there wouldn't be silence long enough for questions. "Also landlord applications," she said. "And your resume, and your VA stuff. We'll get you stable. Stable. That word again. I signed. I capped the pen. I slid the packet back. Lindsay smiled like she'd just won a prize. Back in the courtroom, I kept my voice even. Your Honor, I said my sister got involved because my grandmother died shortly after I separated from the military. I was dealing with transition job applications and funeral arrangements. Lindsay volunteered to help with estate paperwork and setting up account notifications. Lindsay let out a small sympathetic laugh. See, she admits it. Sloane's pen tapped once on the table. That was her version of an eye roll. Judge Morrison's expression didn't change. Ms. Caldwell, she asked Lindsay, did your sister ever specifically authorize you to control notifications and contact information? Lindsay's smile stayed in place, but her eyes sharpened. She wanted me to help, Your Honor. She was overwhelmed. That wasn't an answer. It was a performance. I looked down at the blue folder again. This time I didn't close it. I slid the first page out slightly, just enough to see the heading. Account alert preferences change confirmation. At the bottom was a date that matched the afternoon Lindsay took my phone and said, all done. My stomach didn't drop. It didn't flip. It didn't do anything dramatic. It just went still. Because the feeling wasn't fear anymore. It was clarity. I lifted my eyes to the judge and said, Your Honor, may I approach with Exhibit A? Sloane stood at the same time, ready calm. Like she'd been waiting for Lindsay to talk herself into a corner. And Lindsay, still smiling, shifted in her chair, as if the air in the courtroom had suddenly gotten too thin for her to breathe. I walked up with Exhibit A in my hand and kept my pace slow on purpose. Not dramatic slow, just controlled. The kind of pace that tells everyone in the room I'm not improvising. Judge Morrison held out her hand. I placed the page on the bench. Sloane stayed beside me silent. Evan leaned forward like he wanted to snatch it back through the air. The judge read the header, then scanned the date and the confirmation details. Her eyes flicked once to Lindsay, then back to the page. Ms. Caldwell, she said to Lindsay, this shows a change in alert preferences and contact information. Is this accurate? Lindsay smiled tighter. Your Honor? I helped her set it up. She asked me to. Judge Morrison's pen tapped once. I didn't ask if you helped. I asked if it's accurate. Lindsay's lawyer cleared his throat. Your Honor. Even if her sister assisted with paperless settings, that doesn't change the underlying issue. The funds are missing. That was Evan's move. Redirect. Don't get stuck on the mechanism. Keep the spotlight on the result. Missing money. Mentally unstable. Conservatorship. It was a decent strategy if you're trying to bully someone into collapsing. Judge Morrison looked at me. Ms. Caldwell, the court needs to understand the depletion. Let's talk about the account. I nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I went back to my seat, and as I sat down, the memory hit me so clean, it felt like a file opening in my head. Because the first time I heard the phrase estate disbursement account, I didn't think of scams. I thought of funeral bills. It started with a letter from the probate attorney's office about a week after the service. It explained in plain English that the estate had an account to pay approved expenses and distribute funds. Nothing mysterious, nothing fancy. The kind of thing millions of families deal with every year. Lindsay took that letter like it was addressed to her personally. We'll keep it simple, she said, spreading papers across my mom's table. Everything goes through the disbursement account. That way there's a clean record. Clean record. She loved phrases that sounded responsible. At first it was normal. A funeral home invoice, cemetery fees, probate filing costs, a check to the attorney for standard services. Lindsay would read each line out loud, like she was narrating a documentary about how helpful she was. See, she'd say, this is why you need me. And if I asked a question, she'd look at me like I was trying to derail the family train. Maris, don't stress yourself out, she'd say. After you got out, you're already on edge. She said it so casually, like it was a fact everyone agreed on. Like it was on my driver's license. Like it was engraved on my forehead. Then the spending started shifting. It didn't jump straight to anything insane. Lindsay wasn't sloppy. She was careful. She knew how to boil a frog. One little charge at a time until you realize the water is boiling and you're the one being cooked. The first one I noticed was a payment to something called Bright Line Services. I asked Lindsay what it was. She didn't even blink. Estate cleanout, she said. We had to clear Grandma's house. You weren't available. I wasn't available because I was at a job fair trying to stop being the unstable veteran she kept advertising. But sure. Estate cleanout made sense. I let it go. Then there was Astor Consulting. What's that? I asked. Lindsay sighed. Tax help, probate paperwork. You don't understand this stuff. That one bothered me. Not because I'm a genius accountant, but because Lindsay had the same tone my whole life whenever she wanted me to feel smaller. You don't understand. Let me handle it. And I was tired, so I didn't fight. That was my mistake. Not the signing, not the trusting, the not fighting. Because Lindsay didn't need me to be stupid. She just needed me to be exhausted. A few weeks later, I started getting calls from my mom about money. Lindsay says the account is running low, she told me one morning while I was filling out an application on my laptop. Is that true? I paused. Running low. She said there's been a lot of expenses, and you haven't been paying attention. I stared at the screen. How would she know I haven't been paying attention? My mom hesitated. That hesitation was the sound of my sister's influence. Like Lindsay had already planted the idea in her head. Maris is checked out. Maris is overwhelmed. Maris can't handle it. Because you've been quiet, my mom finally said. You've been different. Different. Another word people use when they don't have facts. I tried to log into the account that same afternoon, and I couldn't. My password didn't work. The security questions didn't work. I tried again slower, like the computer would reward my patience. Denied. I called the bank. After 20 minutes of menus and hold music that sounded like a haunted elevator, I got a representative. I can't access the estate disbursement account, I said. I'm listed on the paperwork. The rep asked security questions, then paused. Ma'am, the contact information on file doesn't match what you're providing. My throat went dry. What contact information? I can't read it out loud for security reasons, she said. But I can tell you it was updated recently. Updated recently. I drove straight to my parents' house. Lindsay's car was in the driveway, of course. She always got there first. She always wanted to be the one holding the story. I walked in and found her at the kitchen table, like she lived there sipping coffee from my mom's mug. What did you change? I asked. Lindsay didn't even look guilty. She looked annoyed, like I'd interrupted her show. What are you talking about? The bank says the contact info doesn't match mine. Lindsay shrugged. I set it up to my email so I could monitor it. You weren't responding. You've been overwhelmed. My dad appeared in the doorway. Maris, your sister is trying to help. Help would be telling me, I said. My voice stayed level, but my hands were cold. Help would be giving me access to my own account. Lindsay leaned back and gave me that expression she'd perfected, the calm face people wear right before they call you crazy. Look at you, she said softly. This is what I mean. After you got out, you snap over little things. Little things. Like my ability to pay rent. Like my credit score. Like my name attached to a draining account. I walked out without yelling. That drove her crazy. Lindsay wanted a scene she could point to later. She wanted to tell everyone I was unstable. She wanted my dad to see me as a threat. She wanted my mom to panic. So I gave her nothing. 2 days later, the hit came. I was applying for a tiny apartment, nothing fancy. 1-bedroom older building, decent neighborhood. I'd saved enough for the deposit. I had references. I had a job interview lined up. The landlord smiled at me and said, should be fine. Then he called the next morning, and his voice was different. Maris, he said, awkward and apologetic. Your credit report came back with some issues. There's a delinquent account and an address history that doesn't match your application. I can't approve you. My stomach tightened. What delinquent account? He cleared his throat. A store card opened recently. I hung up and pulled my credit report again, this time staring at it like it could start talking. New account, recent open date, balance past due, and my address history showed a place I hadn't lived in since high school. My parents' address, which meant someone had been using my name like it was a spare key. I didn't call Lindsay, not yet. I called Sloan. Something's off, I told her. The estate account access changed, and now my credit is getting hit. There was a short pause on the other end. Then Sloan's voice got even quieter, which was how I knew she was taking it seriously. Freeze your credit today, she said. Fraud alert. FTC report. And don't confront your sister again without documentation. I looked down at my hands. They weren't shaking, they were steady. That surprised me. What about the estate account, I asked. Sloan's tone stayed calm. We start building the record. Record. That word again. I opened my laptop, pulled up every email I could find, and started saving screenshots like my life depended on it. Because it did. Back in the courtroom, Judge Morrison's voice cut through my memory. Ms. Caldwell, she said, your sister claims you failed to act. Yet you're telling the court you were locked out and contact information was changed. I looked at Lindsay. She stared straight ahead, lips pressed together, eyes slightly shiny again, ready to cry on command. I turned back to the judge. Yes, Your Honor, and I have documentation of the changes, the dates, and the notifications. Evan shifted in his seat. The first crack. Not big, just enough to notice. Judge Morrison nodded slowly. All right, she said. Then the next question is simple. She glanced down at the papers, then up at Lindsay. Why was your sister's contact information changed to begin with? And who authorized it? My tongue pressed against the back of my teeth as Lindsay took a breath to answer, and I decided to let her. She turned to the judge with that sweet, practiced face. Your Honor, she authorized it. She wanted me to help. After she got out, she couldn't keep up with basic responsibilities. There it was again, dressed up like concern. Judge Morrison didn't react. She looked at Evan. Mr. Pritchard, she said. Do you have a written authorization for changes to contact information? Evan's eyes flicked toward Lindsay. He didn't say no. He didn't say yes. He said the thing lawyers say when they want time. We can address that, Your Honor. But the issue remains that funds are missing, and Ms. Caldwell has not taken timely action. Sloan leaned forward. Your Honor, Ms. Caldwell did take action. She's prepared to provide documentation of fraud alerts, reports, and communication with the bank. Judge Morrison nodded once. We'll get to that. Ms. Caldwell, she looked at me. You mentioned your credit was impacted. Explain. I stood, not fast, not slow, just normal. After the estate account access changed, I said I applied for housing and was denied due to a newly opened delinquent account and an address history change. I did not initiate. Lindsay's head tilted slightly, like she was watching a toddler try to explain taxes. Judge Morrison asked, Did you report identity theft? Yes, I said. Lindsay scoffed under her breath. Quiet enough to pretend she didn't. Judge Morrison's pen tapped. To whom? I kept it simple. I placed a fraud alert and froze my credit. I filed an identity theft report with the FTC. I filed a police report for documentation. And I contacted the bank's fraud department regarding both the estate account and the unauthorized changes. The gallery murmured. Not because they cared about process, because the words FTC and police report made it sound less like family drama and more like a felony. Lindsay's smile twitched. Evan cleared his throat. Your Honor, with respect, she's listing steps anyone could take. That doesn't prove she's competent to manage a complex estate. I almost laughed. Complex estate. We weren't managing the Pentagon. We were managing a disbursement account and a stack of bills. Evan said complex because he wanted it to sound like I needed supervision. Like Lindsay was the only adult in the room. Judge Morrison looked down at her notes. Ms. Caldwell, she asked me, when did you freeze your credit? I answered honestly. The same day I saw the credit report and the new account. Within hours. Judge Morrison looked at Lindsay again. And when did you file this petition for emergency conservatorship? Evan answered for her. 3 days after, Your Honor. 3 days? That timing wasn't an accident. Lindsay didn't panic because she was worried about me. She panicked because I started moving like someone who wasn't under her thumb anymore. After I left my parents' house that day, after Lindsay admitted she'd set notifications to her own email, like it was no big deal I didn't go home and cry. I went to my car and sat there with my hands on the steering wheel until my breathing slowed down. Then I called the bank again, this time with my phone on speaker and my notepad open. The fraud rep was different from the first one. Sharper, more cautious. She asked questions like she'd heard this story before. Can you confirm the date you last successfully accessed the account, she asked. I can't, I said. I was locked out. Do you have reason to believe a family member changed contact information? I didn't want to say it. Saying it out loud made it real. It made it ugly. Yes, I said. She paused. Okay, I'm going to open a fraud case. For the estate disbursement account, we may require documentation from the probate attorney regarding authorized signers. For your personal credit issue, we'll document the identity theft concern. I also recommend you file with the FTC. I already did, I said. That surprised her. Good, she said like she meant it. Keep that report number. I wrote it down. Then I did the thing Lindsay never expected me to do. Stopped asking for permission. I pulled my credit report from all 3 bureaus. I froze my credit at each one. I put a fraud alert. I saved the confirmation pages as PDFs and printed them. Then I went to the police station. Not because I thought a detective was going to kick down Lindsay's door that afternoon. I'm not naive. I went because paperwork matters. Because in the real world, the person who wins isn't always the loudest. It's the one who shows up with timestamps. The officer at the front desk looked tired. He asked my name, asked what I needed, and I said, I need to file an identity theft report. He glanced at me. Do you know who did it? I suspect someone, I said. But I'm not here to accuse without evidence. I'm here to document. He nodded like he'd heard that before. He handed me a form. I filled it out. I kept it factual. Dates, accounts, addresses. No speech, no sob story. When I walked out, I felt something I hadn't felt since I got out direction. Lindsay didn't like direction. She liked confusion. She liked me unsure asking, what do I do? She liked being the answer. So she escalated. That night, my mom called me. Her voice was thin the way it gets when she's already had the conversation she doesn't want to admit she had. Lindsay says you're spiraling, she told me. I didn't react. What did she say? She said you're making accusations, that you're paranoid, that after you got out, my mom stopped herself like she realized she'd said it. I let the silence sit for one beat. Mom? I said I filed an FTC report. I froze my credit. I'm documenting changes on the account. That's not spiraling. That's fixing a problem. My mom sighed. Your sister is just worried. You've been quiet. Quiet again. Always quiet. Like quiet was a crime. Quiet is safer than yelling in this house, I said. Not bitter, just true. And Lindsay knows that. My dad got on the line next. His voice was firm in the way people get when they're wrong, but committed. Myris, he said, you need to stop this. Your sister is trying to help, and you're making it sound like she's a criminal. I felt my jaw tighten. Dad, I got denied housing because of a new delinquent account. The bank says the estate account contact info was changed. Those are facts. She said you told her to change it, he snapped. Did you see me tell her? I asked. Silence. That was the part that hurt, but I didn't let it turn into a monologue. Pain didn't belong on a witness stand. Paper did. I'm not asking you to pick sides, I said. I'm asking you to stop letting her speak for me. He exhaled hard. We're having a family meeting. A family meeting was Lindsay's favorite weapon. It meant she could corner me with an audience and call it love. I'm not coming, I said. My dad's voice rose. See? This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're acting unstable. Unstable. The word landed like it had been waiting in his mouth. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I made a choice. I'm sending you copies of my reports, I said. Read them or don't. But I'm done debating my reality. I hung up, and the next morning, there was an envelope taped to my parents' front door with my name on it. Inside was the petition for emergency conservatorship, filed by Lindsay, signed by her lawyer, claiming I was mentally unstable after I got out, claiming I couldn't manage money, claiming I was a danger to myself. It was like she took every hard day I'd had, adjusting to civilian life, and turned it into a weapon with letterhead. I called Sloan immediately. Sloan listened without interrupting. Then she said, okay. Good. Good, I repeated. Yes, she said. Because now she's not just whispering. Now she's making statements she has to stand behind. Back in the courtroom, Judge Morrison's eyes moved between the lawyers, like she was weighing something. Ms. Caldwell, she said, looking at Lindsay, you filed an emergency petition 3 days after your sister froze her credit and reported identity theft. That timing is interesting. Lindsay's lips parted slightly. She tried to keep the victim face on, but it didn't sit right anymore. Judge Morrison looked down at Exhibit A again. I want to see the full record of account access and notification changes, she said, and I want to know exactly who had control of the alerts when those transfers occurred. Evan shifted. Lindsay's fingers curled around the edge of her table. Sloan slid another document closer to me, and I could see the top line before I even picked it up. Online banking contact change log. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. I just placed my hand on the paper like I was claiming something that had always belonged to me. I picked up the contact change log and felt the weight of it before I even read a single line. Paper has a funny way of making people honest, or at least quiet. Judge Morrison adjusted her glasses. Ms. Mercer, she said to Sloan, is this log authenticated? Yes, Your Honor, Sloan replied. It was provided by the bank in response to our fraud inquiry. We can provide the case reference number and the bank representative's contact. Evan's jaw tightened. He didn't object. He just stared at the document like it had personally betrayed him. Lindsay leaned toward him and whispered something. It was quick, sharp, not the tone of a worried sister. More like a manager scolding an employee for letting a customer see the kitchen. Judge Morrison looked at Lindsay. Ms. Caldwell, before we go further into the log, I want to understand the basis of your mental incapacity claim. You've used the phrase mentally unstable after she got out multiple times. What specifically are you referencing? Lindsay's face brightened. This was her comfort zone again. Story time, feelings, vibes. She put a hand on her chest, like she was about to sing the national anthem. Your Honor, she said softly. I've watched my sister change. She isolates. She gets irritable. She forgets things. She doesn't communicate. She doesn't show up for family events. She's not present. She has trouble sleeping. My aunt in the back row nodded like she was watching a documentary about war. My cousin whispered, Poor thing, like he knew anything about me besides my name. Lindsay continued. And she's been seeing the VA. She's in treatment. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying it shows she needs support, someone to manage things so she doesn't fall apart. There it was, the trick. Take something normal getting VA care after separation and present it like a warning label. I kept my face neutral, but inside I was counting how many times she said support without once saying I asked her what she needed. Judge Morrison didn't look impressed. Many veterans see the VA, she said. That alone does not establish incapacity. Lindsay blinked. I know, Your Honor, but combined with her behavior, Evan cut in smoothly. Your Honor, our petition is based on functional concerns. She has demonstrated an inability to manage financial matters, and her recent actions show poor judgment and paranoia. Paranoia, right on schedule. Because when you accuse someone of fraud, the easiest counter is to call them unstable. Sloane's voice stayed calm. Your Honor, reporting identity theft is not paranoia. It's a rational response to documented changes and financial harm. Judge Morrison held up a hand. I'm going to hear from Ms. Caldwell directly, she said, looking at me. Ms. Caldwell, are you currently employed? Yes, Your Honor, I said. Evan pounced. Doing what? I looked at him. A civilian job, I said. Full-time. He tried again. And how long have you held that job? Long enough to get denied an apartment because someone opened a delinquent account under my name, I said, still even. Still plain. A couple people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. That wasn't the version Lindsay sold them. Judge Morrison asked, Are you under any guardianship now? No. Have you ever been found incompetent by any court? No. Have you ever been hospitalized for mental incapacity? No. Lindsay's mouth tightened. She didn't like yes or no questions. She liked fog. Fog is where she thrives. Judge Morrison turned back to her. Ms. Caldwell, what you've described sounds like stress and adjustment after separation. It does not automatically equate to incapacity. Lindsay's voice got sharper. Your Honor! She's not just stressed. She makes reckless accusations. She's accused me of stealing. She's accused the bank of lying. She's filed reports. She's escalating. Escalating. Like filing paperwork was a tantrum. I almost wanted to tell her, you should see what I can do when I actually escalate. But I didn't. Because this wasn't about winning with comebacks. It was about letting Lindsay hang herself with her own mouth. Judge Morrison tapped the contact changelog with her pen. Let's return to facts, she said. Ms. Caldwell, when did you set up paperless alerts? Lindsay smiled, relieved. Right after Grandma passed. Maris was overwhelmed. She asked me to help. Judge Morrison's tone stayed flat. Did you set them to your email or hers? Lindsay hesitated. It was a tiny pause, but it was there. I set them up so I could monitor and make sure nothing was missed. So your email, the judge clarified. Yes, Lindsay said, trying to sound noble. Because she wasn't checking. Evan added quickly. This was done with good intent, Your Honor. Good intent. The magic phrase people use when they want to avoid the consequences of a bad action. Judge Morrison's eyes narrowed slightly. And did you inform your sister you were receiving her account alerts? Lindsay's chin lifted. I told her I was helping. That's not what I asked, Judge Morrison said. The room got quiet again. Even my relatives stopped shifting. Silence is different when everyone knows someone just got caught in a lie, but they don't know how deep the lie goes yet. Lindsay's voice turned thin. It was a stressful time. We were all grieving. I don't remember every conversation. Convenient. Sloane spoke up. Your Honor, we have documentation of a conversation in writing. She slid a printed page forward, a text message thread. I didn't look at Lindsay. I didn't need to. I remembered it. 2 days after she took my phone at my mom's kitchen table, Lindsay texted me, Don't worry. I set up paperless so I'll see everything. You just focus on getting stable. Stable. Always stable, like I was a wobbly chair she had to fix. Judge Morrison read the thread, then looked up. Ms. Caldwell, she said to Lindsay, you used the phrase getting stable in reference to your sister after she separated from the military. Lindsay's smile disappeared. It's just a phrase. And you told her you would see everything. The judge continued, so you were aware you would receive alerts and she would not. Lindsay's eyes flicked to Evan again. Evan didn't move. He kept his hands folded like he was trying to shrink into the table. Judge Morrison set the paper down. Now, she said, the account shows multiple transfers during the period when you were receiving alerts. What did you do when you saw those transfers? Lindsay's voice rose slightly. Those transfers were legitimate. Expenses, cleanup, consulting. Who approved them? The judge asked. Lindsay started to talk, then stopped. Because any answer boxed her in. If she said Maris approved them, the question became why Maris wasn't receiving alerts. If she said Lindsay approved them, she just admitted control. Evan jumped in. Your Honor, we can submit invoices and supporting documents. Do that, the judge said, not unkindly. But I'm still trying to understand why a petition for conservatorship was filed when the petitioner had control over notifications and had access to the information needed to prevent harm. That sentence landed like a slap. My dad swallowed hard. I saw him glance at Lindsay for the first time like he was seeing a stranger. Lindsay shifted in her chair, and her voice changed. The softness fell off. The mask slipped. Because she's not okay, she snapped. After she got out, she got paranoid and cold, and she stopped herself, catching the edge of her own anger. Too late. Judge Morrison's eyebrows lifted. Cold, she repeated. Or calm. Lindsay didn't answer. Her face was flushed now. The Victim Act wasn't available anymore. Not with the log sitting on the bench, and her own text message in the judge's hand. Sloane's hand brushed the edge of the contact change log, and she looked at me like she was handing me the wheel. I stood again, steady. Your Honor, I said my sister didn't file this petition because she was scared for me. She filed it because I started documenting, and the moment I froze my credit and reported fraud, she decided the fastest way to control the narrative was to control me. Evan opened his mouth to object. Judge Morrison held up a hand. Ms. Caldwell, she said, looking at me, show me the timeline. Sloane slid a packet toward me, clean-clipped, labeled by date. I didn't rush. I didn't dramatize it. I simply placed the first page on the bench right beside the contact change log and let the dates start doing what Lindsay couldn't. Talking. I laid the timeline packet down like I was clocking in. Judge Morrison didn't ask for drama. She asked for order. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't being punished for being quiet. I was being rewarded for being precise. Sloane stood beside me and said, Your Honor, these exhibits are organized by date. Each one corresponds to a documented change or event contact updates, paperless settings transfers, and the filing of the petition. Judge Morrison nodded. Proceed. I pointed to the first page. This is the bank's confirmation of paperless alerts being enabled on the estate disbursement account, I said. Date and time are at the bottom. Lindsay leaned forward, trying to read it from across the room, like she could burn it with her eyes. Judge Morrison read silently, then asked in the email address on file. Sloane answered without looking up. An address created during the same week as the setup, not Miss Caldwell's long-standing personal email. Evan's head turned slightly toward Lindsay. Just slightly. Like he was wondering why she hadn't warned him about that detail. I flipped to the next page. This is the contact change log, I said. The bank notes that the phone number and mailing address were updated 2 days after paperless was enabled. Judge Morrison looked up. Updated by whom? That's what we requested from the bank, Sloane said. For privacy and security, the bank's response is limited, but it identifies the method online banking access, not in-person branch verification. Evan jumped in fast. Your Honor, online access could have been Ms. Caldwell. She could have changed her own information and forgotten. That's consistent with our concern. I didn't even look at him. I'd heard this line my whole life. If Maris doesn't remember, it must be because Maris is unstable. Judge Morrison turned to me. Ms. Caldwell, did you change your contact information online? No, Your Honor. And did you have access to the account at that time? No, I said. I was already having login issues. Lindsay scoffed again under her breath, like my memory was a cute hobby. Judge Morrison held up a hand, stopping her without looking at her. She turned back to the packet. Continue. I flipped another page. This is the USPS change of address confirmation, I said. The gallery shifted. People always perk up when you say USPS like the mail is sacred, and tampering with it is a special kind of evil. Which honestly it is. Judge Morrison's eyes narrowed. Explain. In the month after my grandmother passed, I stopped receiving estate-related mail at my current address, I said. This confirmation shows a forwarding request from my address to my parents' address. My dad's face tightened. He looked like he wanted to sink into his chair. Judge Morrison asked, "Did you submit this change of address request?" "No," I said. "And did you authorize your sister to submit it?" I let a beat pass, not for drama, but because the truth mattered. "No, Your Honor." Lindsay's voice cut in sharp and annoyed. "Your Honor, she was staying with our parents. It makes sense the mail would go there." Judge Morrison looked directly at her. The question is not whether it makes sense. The question is whether it was authorized. Lindsay opened her mouth, then closed it, then tried a different angle. After she got out, she was all over the place. She didn't have a stable address. I almost laughed. I had a stable address. She just didn't like that it was outside her control. Judge Morrison didn't laugh. She wrote something down. I turned to the next page. These are the transfer confirmations, I said. Each one includes the date amount and the recipient. I didn't read the amounts out loud like a game show host. I didn't need to. The judge could see the pattern. Evan tried to interrupt. "Your Honor, these were expenses." Judge Morrison held up a finger. "Let her finish." I kept going. "This page is the bank's fraud case reference number," I said. "Opened the same day I was denied housing due to a new delinquent account." Judge Morrison glanced up. "And this." I flipped the next sheet. FTC Identity Theft Report Confirmation. Evan's lips pressed together. Lindsay's hands were no longer folded nicely. They were clenched on the edge of the table, knuckles pale. Judge Morrison sat back slightly, eyes moving over the packet. When she spoke again, her tone was quieter. "Ms. Caldwell," she said to Lindsay, "your sister has presented a timeline indicating that paperless alerts were set to an email created during the same week that contact information was changed online, that mail was redirected, that transfers occurred, and that she filed formal reports. Meanwhile, you filed this emergency petition 3 days after she began documenting. Do you understand why I'm concerned?" Lindsay forced a shaky smile. "Your Honor, I'm concerned too. That's why I filed. She's paranoid. She's spiraling. She's filing reports because she doesn't remember what she agreed to." There it was. The classic move, make the receipts look like symptoms. Sloan stepped in. "Your Honor, we also have written communications that show Ms. Caldwell's sister controlling access." Judge Morrison nodded. "Show me." Sloan handed over a short printed email exchange. I recognized it instantly. It was the one where I asked Lindsay for login access. "Awesome thon mess," after I got locked out. Lindsay's response was one line. "Stop stressing. I'm handling it." Judge Morrison read it twice. Then she looked up. "Ms. Caldwell," she said to Lindsay, "why did you not provide her access when she requested it?" Lindsay's voice got higher. "Because she wasn't stable. After she got out, she would obsess. She would fixate. And you would make things worse." My sister's not stable was Lindsay's universal excuse for everything she wanted to do. Judge Morrison's pen tapped once. "You're describing disagreement as incapacity." Lindsay's cheeks flushed. Evan leaned toward her and whispered something, but Lindsay didn't listen. She was too busy trying to regain control of the room. "You don't understand what it's like." Lindsay snapped at the judge, then immediately tried to soften it. "I mean, Your Honor, you don't live with her. She gets cold. She shuts down. She doesn't respond. That's not normal." Judge Morrison looked at her, then looked at me, then looked back at Lindsay. "You mean she stayed calm," the judge said. "In a stressful situation." Lindsay's jaw tightened. "It's not calm. It's like she's disconnected." Sloan spoke like she was reading from a manual. "That is not a legal standard for incapacity, Your Honor." Judge Morrison nodded. "Correct." Evan finally stood. "Your Honor, even if Ms. Caldwell's sister assisted with alerts, the funds are still depleted. We are requesting immediate authority to stop further loss." Judge Morrison's eyes stayed on Evan, but her words were aimed at Lindsay. "Authority for whom?" "For Ms. Lindsay Caldwell temporarily," Evan said. Judge Morrison paused, the kind of pause that makes a courtroom feel smaller. Then she asked Ms. Caldwell, "Do you have any invoices or proof that these transfers were legitimate estate expenses?" Evan opened a folder. Lindsay shifted like she'd expected this. But before they could speak, Judge Morrison held up her hand again. Not yet, she said. One more question first. She looked at Lindsay. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. Ms. Caldwell, when you said you were monitoring the account through paperless alerts, did you ever alert your sister that funds were leaving? Did you ever inform the probate attorney? Did you ever take any action to stop loss if you truly believed she was incapable? Lindsay stared at her, because that question had teeth. If Lindsay said yes, she'd need proof. If she said no, she'd look negligent at best and complicit at worst. Evan's eyes widened slightly. He turned toward Lindsay again, more openly this time. Lindsay's lips parted. She tried to speak. Nothing came out. My dad swallowed hard, staring at the table like he could hide under it. Judge Morrison waited patient as a brick wall. And I didn't move, because this wasn't my trap. It was Lindsay's. She took a breath and finally said, I didn't want to upset her. Judge Morrison's eyebrows lifted. You didn't want to upset someone you claim is a danger to herself, while hundreds of thousands of dollars were leaving an account you were monitoring. Lindsay's face went pale. Evan started to speak, but Judge Morrison cut him off. No, she said. I want Ms. Caldwell to answer. Lindsay's hands trembled slightly on the table now, the first real crack in her composure. And in that quiet moment, with the timeline spread out on the bench and her own words hanging in the air, Lindsay did the one thing she always did when she felt cornered. She went for my reputation. She's doing this because she hates me, Lindsay blurted. After she got out, she got bitter. She wants to ruin me. She's making it up because she's embarrassed she can't manage money. Judge Morrison didn't look at me. She didn't need to. She looked at Lindsay like she was measuring something. Then she turned one page deeper into my packet and said, All right, let's talk about what happens when someone tries to ruin you with facts. My hands stayed flat on the table as Judge Morrison pulled a page from the middle of my packet and held it slightly higher. This, she said, is an email labeled Concern for Tenant Safety. I didn't look back at the gallery, but I felt my relatives sit up. People love a scandal when it comes with a subject line. Judge Morrison looked at me. Ms. Caldwell, did you send this email? No, Your Honor. She turned the paper slightly. It was sent to a property manager 2 days before you applied for housing. Lindsay's face didn't change, but her throat moved like she swallowed something sharp. Evan spoke fast. Your Honor, that email isn't relevant to the estate account. Judge Morrison's eyes stayed on him. It's relevant to motive and credibility, she said. If someone is attempting to portray Ms. Caldwell as unstable to third parties, it supports the court's need to scrutinize this petition. Evan sat back down slowly. Judge Morrison read one line, then looked up. The sender writes, She's a veteran who's been struggling since she got out. I'm worried she may be unstable. She set the page down and looked directly at Lindsay. Ms. Caldwell, did you send this? Lindsay blinked. No, Your Honor. Do you recognize the email address it came from? Lindsay glanced. I'm not sure. Sloane didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Your Honor, she said, the email address belongs to Ms. Lindsay Caldwell. It's also listed in the account alert preferences we submitted. That line landed like a brick. The gallery made a sound. This time it was a real gasp. Not the polite money gasp from earlier. This was the gasp people make when they realize they've been cheering for the wrong person. Lindsay's head turned toward Sloane, like she wanted to burn her with her eyes. That's ridiculous! Lindsay snapped, and the sap ruined her innocent tone. Judge Morrison's voice stayed level. Ms. Caldwell, answer the question. Did you send the email to the property manager? Lindsay tried to recover. She softened her face again, but it didn't fit now. Your Honor, I might have reached out because I was worried. I wasn't trying to sabotage her. I was trying to protect her. After she got out, Stop, Judge Morrison said, not loud but final. Do not use that phrase as a substitute for evidence. Lindsay went still. Even my dad looked startled. Judge Morrison turned back to the estate issue. Now, she said, let's return to the account. Mr. Pritchard, you've claimed Mrs. Caldwell failed to act, but she has presented a fraud case credit freeze confirmations and a timeline of contact changes that point toward control being held by her sister. Evan stood again. He tried to sound confident. Your Honor, our position is that Ms. Caldwell is confused about the sequence of events. She was grieving. She was overwhelmed. She may have authorized her sister and then forgotten. That's the concern. Her behavior is erratic. Judge Morrison stared at him for a beat. Erratic is not a legal term, she said. Incapacity is. And incapacity requires more than a family member's opinion. Lindsay's fingers tightened around her pen. She looked down then back up, as if she was trying to decide which mask to wear. I could tell which one she chose when she spoke next. "Your Honor," Lindsay said, and her voice got slightly louder. "I've lived with her. I've seen it. She wakes up in the middle of the night and just sits there. She won't talk. She can't focus. She's not right." I felt my jaw tighten, but I didn't give her the reaction she wanted. Judge Morrison looked at Lindsay. "Did you ever take her to a doctor? Did you ever seek a formal evaluation?" Lindsay hesitated. She sees the VA. "That's not an answer," the judge said. "Did you seek an evaluation for incapacity?" "No," Lindsay said, frustrated. "So you are asking this court to strip your sister of her legal rights based on your personal assessment," Judge Morrison said, "while you were controlling alerts on an account from which funds were leaving." Lindsay's face flushed. "You're making it sound like I'm some villain." Judge Morrison's gaze didn't move. "I'm making it sound like the record." Sloan leaned forward slightly. "Your Honor, we're prepared to show the exact sequence of transfers and the corresponding alert settings. We're also prepared to submit a request for an accounting and for protective measures regarding the estate disbursement account." Evan cut in. "Your Honor, we are requesting the same protective measures by appointing Lindsay as conservator." Sloan's eyebrows rose just a touch. "So the solution to suspected abuse of access is to grant more access." The judge didn't smile, but I could tell she heard the sarcasm. Judge Morrison looked at Lindsay. "Ms. Caldwell, tell me plainly, what do you want to happen today?" Lindsay straightened. "Here we go." This was her moment. "I want temporary conservatorship," she said. "I want the authority to manage the estate funds and my sister's financial affairs, so nothing else gets lost. I want to keep her safe." "Safe?" Again. Judge Morrison asked. "If you obtain conservatorship, what will you do first?" Lindsay didn't miss a beat. "Freeze the account takeover statements and stop her from making impulsive decisions." Judge Morrison tilted her head. "Impulsive decisions like filing fraud reports and freezing her credit." Lindsay's mouth opened, then closed. Evan jumped in. "Your Honor, her reports could damage relationships and create unnecessary legal entanglements." "Unnecessary for whom?" the judge asked. That question made Evan pause because there was no clean answer. Judge Morrison turned to me. "Ms. Caldwell, do you feel you are a danger to yourself?" "No, Your Honor." "Do you feel you are unable to manage your affairs?" "No." "Do you have documentation of your employment housing attempts and steps taken to secure your accounts?" "Yes," I said. Judge Morrison nodded. "Then I want to see it." Sloan handed me another sheet. A simple letter from my employer verifying employment. I approached and handed it to the clerk. Evan watched me walk like I was looking for a stumble. Like I'd trip and prove Lindsay right. I didn't. I handed over the letter, then another page, my housing application denial email, then a copy of my credit freeze confirmation. Judge Morrison reviewed them quickly. Her expression stayed neutral, but the rhythm of the hearing changed. The court was no longer treating Lindsay's story as truth by default. Lindsay felt it too. She leaned forward, voice rising. "Your Honor, she's manipulating you. She's good at acting calm. That's what she does now." She shuts off. Judge Morrison looked up. "Ms. Caldwell, you keep describing calm as a symptom." "It's not calm," Lindsay insisted. "It's like she's trying to punish us." After she got out, she became... Judge Morrison cut her off again. "Enough!" The word filled the room and made my Aunt Denise sit back like someone had pulled a plug. The judge turned a page in the packet, then asked a question that didn't sound like a question at all. "Ms. Caldwell," she said to Lindsay, "you testified you monitored the account and set up paperless alerts. You also testified you were concerned about theft and mismanagement. Yet you never alerted your sister, never reported suspected fraud, and you now seek conservatorship after she froze her credit and filed reports." She paused, eyes steady. "Explain that." Lindsay's lips pressed together. She glanced at Evan, and Evan's hand went to his pen, like he could write her an escape route. Lindsay finally spoke, and her voice was thinner now. "I didn't want to upset her. She's volatile." Judge Morrison didn't blink. "Volatile enough that you needed conservatorship, but not volatile enough to justify telling her money was leaving her account." Lindsay's face went pale again. She tried to smile, but it came out wrong. Evan stood quickly. "Your Honor, we object to this line of..." Judge Morrison raised a hand. "Sit down," she said, and Evan sat. Then the judge looked at Sloan. "Ms. Mercer, does your client have evidence identifying who made the contact changes?" Sloan answered calmly. "We do, Your Honor, within the limits of what the bank can provide without subpoena. The method and associated email align with Ms. Lindsay Caldwell." Judge Morrison nodded slowly, like she was assembling something. Lindsay tried one last time to grab the narrative. "This is a family matter," she said. "She's turning it into a criminal thing because she's embarrassed." Judge Morrison's voice stayed even. "Fraud isn't less fraud because you share a last name." I stayed silent while she said it. Not because I didn't want to speak, but because hearing it from the judge hit harder. Judge Morrison looked down at the stack again, then back at Lindsay. "All right," she said. "Let's look at the evidence that speaks for itself." Sloane slid a new exhibit forward, clean labeled and simple. At the top in bold it read, "Account alert settings, email destination." And underneath it was the email address Lindsay had just claimed she didn't recognize. The moment that exhibit hit the bench, Lindsay stopped blinking. Judge Morrison ran her finger under the email address like she was underlining it in her mind. Then she looked up. "Ms. Caldwell," she said, "is this your email address?" Lindsay's lips parted, but no sound came out. Evan leaned forward. "Your Honor, that's not conclusive. Email addresses can be spoofed. Accounts can be shared." Judge Morrison held up a hand. "Mr. Pritchard, I'm not asking you," she said. "I'm asking the petitioner." She turned back to Lindsay. "Answer the question." Lindsay's eyes flicked to the gallery, to my dad, to my mom, to her little support section. She wanted someone to jump in. No one moved. "Yes," Lindsay said finally, and it came out like she hated the word. "That's my email." Judge Morrison nodded once, then tapped the page. "So the estate account's paperless alerts and statements were routed to you." "I was helping," Lindsay said quickly. "She asked me to." Judge Morrison didn't argue. She just moved to the next sheet. "This is a contact change confirmation," she said. "It lists an updated phone number. Is this your phone number, Ms. Caldwell?" Lindsay's face tightened. I don't know." Sloane spoke smoothly. "Your Honor. It matches Ms. Caldwell's number on the petition she filed with this court. Same area code, same last four." Evan's pen stopped moving. He stared at the paper like it was a snake. Judge Morrison looked at Lindsay again. "So, alerts went to your email. The phone number on file appears to be yours, and you have testified you were monitoring the account." Lindsay's voice rose. "Because she wasn't. After she got out, No, Judge Morrison said sharper now. "Do not hide behind that phrase." The judge turned the page. "Now let's discuss the transfers." She read the first entry out loud. Date, amount, recipient, then the next, and the next. Not in a dramatic way, in a steady, boring way. Which somehow made it worse for Lindsay, because boring is what happens when facts are doing the punching. Judge Morrison looked up. "Ms. Caldwell, when you received paperless alerts about these transfers, what did you do?" Lindsay opened her hands like she was offering her innocence to the court. "Those were legitimate expenses. Provide invoices," the judge said. "But answer the question. When you received the alerts, did you inform your sister?" Lindsay's jaw clenched. She was overwhelmed. "Did you inform her?" Judge Morrison repeated. "No," Lindsay said, barely audible. "Did you inform the probate attorney?" the judge asked. "No." "Did you contact the bank to report fraud if you believed she was incompetent or being taken advantage of?" the judge continued. Lindsay's face was red now. "No." Judge Morrison's pen tapped once. "So you monitored the account, watched money leave, did not inform the beneficiary, did not inform counsel, and then filed an emergency petition claiming your sister failed to act." Lindsay tried to breathe through her nose. The way people do right before they start yelling in public. Evan stood quickly. "Your Honor, we object. This is turning into an accusation against the petitioner." Judge Morrison didn't even look up. "It is an examination of credibility," she said. "Sit down." Evan sat. Sloane slid another exhibit forward. "Your Honor. This is the use PS, forwarding confirmation," Ms. Caldwell referenced, she said. "It shows estate-related mail being rerouted to the parent's address during the same period." Judge Morrison looked at it, then glanced at my dad. He stared straight ahead, jaw tight, not daring to react. Lindsay jumped in too fast. She was staying there. "It makes sense." Judge Morrison looked at her like she was exhausted. "You keep saying it makes sense. I keep asking, who authorized it?" Lindsay's voice cracked. "I was trying to keep things organized." Sloane didn't raise her voice. "Organization doesn't require secrecy." That line did something to the gallery. My Aunt Denise shifted, and this time it wasn't curiosity. It was discomfort. Because secrecy is what people recognize when they've been lied to. Judge Morrison turned back to me. "Ms. Caldwell," she said, When did you discover you were no longer receiving alerts? When I was locked out and the bank told me the contact info didn't match, I said. And when you discovered your credit issue, she asked. The day I was denied housing, I said. I pulled my report, froze my credit, and filed the FTC report. Judge Morrison nodded. So you acted promptly once you had information? Yes, I said. And you did not have information because your sister had the alerts, the judge concluded. Lindsay leaned forward, voice sharp again. That's not fair, she could have asked. I kept my face blank. Sloan spoke for me. She did ask, Sloan said, sliding the email exchange forward. And Ms. Caldwell responded, Stop stressing, I'm handling it. Judge Morrison read it and inhaled slowly. Ms. Caldwell, she said to Lindsay, you told her you were handling it. Lindsay's eyes flared. Because she can't handle it. And yet, Judge Morrison said, when she began handling it by freezing her credit and filing reports, you filed an emergency petition to take her rights. Lindsay's mouth opened. The words didn't come out clean. She's trying to ruin me, Lindsay said. And now her voice had the edge of panic. She's turning everyone against me because she's embarrassed. She's mad she can't manage money. Judge Morrison didn't respond to the emotion. She responded to the record. She tapped the alert destination exhibit again. Ms. Caldwell, she said this email address is yours. This phone number appears to be yours. You admitted you monitored the account. So I'll ask you plainly. The judge leaned forward the way people do when they're done being patient. Did you make these changes for your sister's benefit or for yours? Lindsay's eyes flicked to Evan like he could pull her out of the hole with a magic word. Evan's lips pressed together. He wasn't saving her, he was saving himself. Lindsay tried to smile, tried to soften her voice, tried to revive the concerned sister character. For her, she said, for her safety. Judge Morrison nodded slowly. Then explain why you sent an email to a property manager warning that she was unstable. Lindsay snapped her head up. I didn't warn, I just said I was concerned. Judge Morrison didn't blink. It was 2 days before she applied for housing. That wasn't concern. That was interference. The gallery went quiet. My mom's hands were clasped tight in her lap. My dad stared at the table like it owed him answers. Lindsay's face had changed now. She looked less like a savior and more like someone caught stealing from a register while still wearing the store uniform. Evan stood again, voice controlled, trying to regain ground. Your Honor, even if Ms. Caldwell's sister received alerts, the transfers could still have been authorized. There may be a written authorization signed by Ms. Maris Caldwell, allowing her sister to assist. Judge Morrison's eyes narrowed. Do you have such a document? Evan hesitated for half a beat. We do. Lindsay's head turned toward him fast. She hadn't expected him to say it out loud yet. Evan continued, Ms. Caldwell signed an authorization shortly after the death. It permitted her sister to act in support of estate administration. There it was, the pivot. If they could claim I authorized it, then the whole thing becomes misunderstanding. Family drama, not fraud. Lindsay's breathing steadied. You could almost see her relief, like she'd just grabbed the edge of the pool after slipping underwater. Judge Morrison looked at me. Ms. Caldwell, she said, did you sign an authorization? I didn't flinch. I didn't rush to deny. Because denying what's true is how you lose credibility. And I wasn't here to lose. It looks like my signature, I said calmly. And I did sign papers during that time. Lindsay exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. Evan's voice sharpened, smelling victory, so she admits it. Judge Morrison didn't react. Produce the document, she said. Evan reached into his folder. Lindsay's eyes stayed locked on the judge, trying to project innocence through sheer will. Sloan didn't move. She didn't need to. Her hand rested on my packet, like a hand on a steering wheel. Evan walked up and handed the authorization to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. Judge Morrison read it slowly. The room held its breath, like it was waiting for a verdict right then. Lindsay finally looked at me, and for the first time all day, her eyes weren't smug. They were hungry, because she thought this paper was the one thing that could erase every other paper. Judge Morrison looked up from the authorization and asked, Ms. Caldwell, did you understand what you were signing? And before anyone could spin the answer, Sloan slid a second page onto the bench. Quiet, precise, like she'd been saving it for the exact moment it could do maximum damage. It was a text from Lindsay sent the same day as the signature. Just one line, sign it. It's standard. I'll handle the rest. I kept my eyes on the judge while Lindsay stared at that text like it had personally offended her. Judge Morrison read the line once, then again slower. Then she set it down and looked at me. Miss Caldwell, she asked. Did you understand what you were signing? I didn't try to play innocent. I didn't act like I'd been tricked by a cartoon villain. I told the truth the way it happened. No, Your Honor, I said. I understood it was estate paperwork. I did not understand it would be used to lock me out, reroute alerts, and move money without my knowledge. Evan pounced, voice crisp. So she signed without reading. That's poor judgment. That's exactly why she needs a conservator. Sloane's head turned slightly toward Evan, and she spoke like she was explaining basic math. Your Honor, signing a document during a funeral period does not equal incapacity, she said. And even if Ms. Caldwell authorized limited assistance, that authorization has limits. Judge Morrison nodded once, still focused. Let's talk about limits, she said. She held up the authorization. This appears to grant assistance with estate administration, she said. It does not, on its face, grant blanket authority to change contact information, reroute alerts, or exclude the beneficiary from access. Mr. Pritchard, where in this document does it allow the petitioner to take exclusive control? Evan opened his mouth, then closed it. He flipped a page. Your Honor, it implies. It implies nothing, Judge Morrison said, sharper now. It either authorizes something, or it doesn't. Lindsay leaned forward, voice quick and defensive. Your Honor, she asked me to handle it. She wanted me to deal with it because she couldn't. After she got out, she was falling apart. Judge Morrison didn't even look at her. She looked at me. Ms. Caldwell, did you request your sister take exclusive control? No, I said. I requested help. And when I asked for access later, she refused. Sloane slid the email exchange forward again. The one where I asked for the login, and Lindsay wrote, "Stop stressing. I'm handling it." Judge Morrison read it and exhaled slowly. Ms. Caldwell, she said to Lindsay, why did you refuse to provide access after she asked? Lindsay snapped, because she was obsessing. That word hung in the air. Obsessing. The nicer way to say not obeying. Judge Morrison's eyes lifted. Or because she was noticing the judge said, and her tone made it clear she wasn't guessing. Lindsay's face went stiff. Evan tried to regain control. Your Honor. Even if Ms. Caldwell's sister made administrative decisions, the core issue is the missing funds. Ms. Caldwell waited until the account was depleted to act. That delay is concerning. Sloane didn't blink. She acted when she discovered she had been locked out and her credit was harmed, she said. That is documented. Judge Morrison looked down at the transfer list again, then back at me. Ms. Caldwell, she asked, do you have documentation that your sister exceeded the scope of any authorization? Yes, I said. In the timeline, I approached again and handed the judge a page I'd highlighted, clean yellow lines, no dramatic circles, no angry notes. This is the section showing the date I signed, I said. And these are the changes that followed. Judge Morrison read it. Paperless alerts enabled, she said. Contact information updated online. Address forwarding initiated. Then transfers. She looked up. Ms. Caldwell, she said to Lindsay, did you make the contact changes and paperless settings before or after this authorization was signed? Lindsay hesitated. Evan answered quickly, after, Your Honor. Judge Morrison tapped the highlighted date. The log shows paperless alerts were enabled the day before, she said. That's before the authorization. The courtroom went silent in a way that felt physical, like the air got heavier. Evan's face tightened. Lindsay's eyes widened slightly. I didn't smile. This wasn't a gotcha game. This was a record catching up to a lie. Judge Morrison looked at Lindsay. You testified this was assistance requested by your sister, yet you enabled paperless alerts to your own email before she signed anything. Lindsay tried to talk her way out. It was the same week. We were grieving. She told me to do it. Judge Morrison held up the text message again. The text says, sign it. It's standard. I'll handle the rest. That is not an instruction from the beneficiary. That is direction from you. Lindsay's cheeks flushed. She looked at the gallery again. She wanted the family to jump in and defend her. They didn't. My dad's eyes were wide now, locked on the judge. My mom's hands were clasped so tight, her knuckles looked white. Evan cleared his throat, trying a new angle. Your Honor, this could still be a misunderstanding. Family members often help each other with estate matters. Judge Morrison's voice stayed calm, but the temperature in it dropped. Family help usually involves transparency, she said. What I'm seeing here is control without disclosure, followed by an emergency petition filed only after the beneficiary reported fraud. Evan opened his mouth again, and Judge Morrison raised a hand. No, she said. I want Ms. Caldwell to answer. She looked at Lindsay. Ms. Caldwell, why did you file this petition? when your sister froze her credit and filed reports. Lindsay's mouth opened then closed. Then she did the thing people do when they realize the facts aren't on their side. She went emotional. "She hates me," Lindsay said, voice shaking. "She's always hated me. She came back from the military acting like she's better than everyone. She looks down on us. She thinks she can walk in here and destroy me with paperwork because she's mad at me." I almost laughed, and not in a cute way, because Lindsay said paperwork like it was a dirty trick. Paperwork was the only reason she wasn't already holding my life in her hands. Judge Morrison didn't react to the rant. She waited until Lindsay ran out of oxygen, then asked one clean question. "Ms. Caldwell," she said, "did you benefit from the transfers?" Lindsay went still. "No." Judge Morrison looked at Evan. "Are the recipient accounts in evidence?" Evan hesitated. "We have names of vendors." Sloan stepped in. "Your Honor, we requested supporting documentation. The bank records list the recipients. Several are not standard vendors. They are accounts with names unrelated to estate administration." Judge Morrison turned to Sloan. "Do you have those names?" Sloan nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." She handed over another sheet, just a list. "No accusations, just recipients." Judge Morrison scanned it, then looked up at Lindsay. One of the recipients matched a name on Lindsay's own petition paperwork, a consulting name Lindsay had used in her emails. Judge Morrison didn't say the name out loud yet. She didn't need to. The way she paused on it was enough. Lindsay's eyes darted. Evan's pen slipped slightly on his pad. Judge Morrison set the list down carefully. "Ms. Caldwell," she said to Lindsay, "when you submitted this petition, you asked the court to believe your sister is unstable and incapable. But the record is showing you had control of alerts. You redirected communication. You refused access. You filed an emergency petition only after she took protective steps, and recipient accounts may be connected to you." Lindsay's face went pale. Her voice came out thin. "That's not what happened." Judge Morrison didn't argue. She flipped another page in my packet. "I want to clarify something," she said, and her eyes moved to me. "Ms. Caldwell, what are you requesting from the court today?" Sloan answered, but she kept it simple. "Your Honor, we request denial of the emergency conservatorship petition, immediate protective measures on the estate disbursement account, and an order for an accounting. We also request that the court note these records for appropriate referral." Evan stood. "Your Honor, that's an attempt to weaponize the court against a family member." Judge Morrison's gaze snapped to him. "The court is not being weaponized," she said. "The court is being used." That sentence hit hard enough that even my Aunt Denise stopped breathing for a second. Lindsay whispered to Evan, frantic now, and I caught a few words. "You said this would work." Evan didn't look at her. He looked at the judge like he was trying to calculate how bad this could get. Judge Morrison leaned forward again, voice steady, almost clinical. "Ms. Caldwell," she said to Lindsay, "I'm going to ask you one last time. Did you set the paperless alerts to your email and control the account notifications without your sister's informed consent?" Lindsay swallowed. Her eyes flicked to my dad, begging. My dad didn't move. And for the first time, Lindsay didn't have anyone else's mouth to speak through. She opened her lips, and Sloan slid one final page onto the bench. The cleanest receipt of them all. The bank's written note from the fraud case documenting that the alert email on file belonged to Lindsay Caldwell. The banknote sat on the bench like it owned the room. Judge Morrison read it without expression, then set it beside the authorization, the transfer list, and the email concern Lindsay had sent. 4 pieces of paper, 4 different angles, one very clear picture. She looked up at Lindsay. "Ms. Caldwell," she said, "the bank's fraud case notes state the alert email belongs to you. You testified you monitored the account and took control of notifications. You did not inform the beneficiary about transfers. You filed an emergency petition shortly after the beneficiary froze her credit and filed reports. And you appear to have interfered with her housing application through a concern email." Lindsay tried to speak, but her mouth was dry now. She licked her lips and looked at Evan. Evan stood voice steady, but a half step too fast. "Your Honor, even if my client made administrative errors, that does not mean Ms. Maris Caldwell is competent to manage complex financial affairs. The court should still appoint a temporary conservator while an accounting occurs." Judge Morrison's eyes narrowed slightly. "You want me to appoint the person who controlled alerts and withheld information as conservator," she said. "That is not a serious proposal." Evan's face stiffened. "Then appoint a neutral third party, Your Honor." Sloan nodded once. We would not oppose that neutral safeguards, she said. We oppose control being placed in the hands of the petitioner who created the conditions used to justify this petition. Judge Morrison tapped her pen one time, then looked at me. Ms. Caldwell, she asked, are you asking this court to punish your sister today? No, Your Honor, I said. Lindsay's head snapped toward me, like she couldn't believe I wasn't going for the throat. I kept my voice plain. I'm asking the court to protect the estate account and to deny a conservatorship that isn't based on a medical finding or a legal standard. I'm also asking the court to order an accounting. Judge Morrison nodded slowly. Thank you, she said. Then she looked at Lindsay again. Ms. Caldwell, you used the phrase mentally unstable after she got out repeatedly. You presented it as fact. You have not provided any evaluation, any finding of incapacity, or any evidence that Ms. Maris Caldwell is a danger to herself. What you have provided is your opinion. Lindsay's eyes were glossy again, but not with the perfect TV tears she'd started with. These were the real kind. The kind that show up when control slips. I'm her sister, Lindsay said, voice cracking. I know her. Judge Morrison didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You know a version of her, the judge said. But you do not get to use a court to turn your opinion into a leash. The gallery went dead silent. My Aunt Denise stared at Lindsay like she was trying to figure out who she'd been defending at family dinners. My cousin looked down at his shoes. My dad's face was tight, but his eyes finally looked awake. Judge Morrison took a breath and spoke in that tone that tells you the decision is already made. This court denies the emergency petition for temporary conservatorship, she said. Lindsay made a small sound like air escaping a balloon. Judge Morrison continued, the petitioner has failed to meet the legal burden required for emergency conservatorship. The respondent has demonstrated appropriate steps to protect her identity and finances, and there is no evidence before this court of incapacity. Evan opened his mouth. Judge Morrison held up her hand. I'm not finished. She looked down at this paperwork again. Given the disputed transactions and the documented control of account alerts by the petitioner, this court orders protective measures regarding the estate disbursement account. She glanced at the clerk. An order will be issued for a temporary freeze on non-essential disbursements pending an accounting. The probate attorney is to provide a complete accounting of expenditures and distributions within 30 days. Any disbursements outside documented estate obligations will require written approval from counsel or further court order. Sloane didn't react outwardly, but I saw the smallest shift in her posture, relief-controlled. Judge Morrison looked at Lindsay. The petitioner is not authorized to make further changes to contact information alert settings or access credentials for the estate account. Lindsay's face went pale, then flushed again. She looked like her body couldn't decide whether to panic or fight. Judge Morrison's tone stayed clinical. Additionally, the court will note the respondent's fraud reports and the bank's fraud case documentation in the record. Any further investigation or referral will proceed through appropriate channels. She didn't say police. She didn't say charges. Courts don't do movie lines. They do paperwork. But everyone in the room understood what appropriate channels meant. Evan cleared his throat, trying to salvage something. Your Honor, can we at least request that Ms. Caldwell undergo? Judge Morrison cut him off. No, she said. The petition is denied. If you believe an evaluation is warranted, you may file a properly supported motion, not a smear. Smear? Hearing the judge call it that felt like someone finally said the quiet part out loud. Lindsay stood abruptly. This is insane, she snapped. She's manipulating everyone. She's always— Ms. Caldwell, Judge Morrison said, voice sharp, sit down. Lindsay froze. Then she sat like her knees gave out. Judge Morrison looked at me one last time. Ms. Caldwell, she said, you are free to leave. Your counsel will receive the written orders. I nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. I didn't look at Lindsay on the way out. That was the final boundary. I wasn't here for eye contact. I was here for a record. Outside the courtroom, the hallway felt colder, like the building was saving its air conditioning for people who tell the truth. Sloane walked beside me. You did well, she said. I didn't do anything, I replied. Sloane's mouth twitched. Exactly. My dad came out a few steps behind, moving like he wasn't sure he was allowed to follow. My mom trailed him, eyes red, quiet. Maris, my dad said, and his voice sounded smaller than it did inside. I stopped and turned just enough to face him. He swallowed. I didn't know. I kept my tone calm. That's the problem. My mom looked down. We thought Lindsay was helping. I nodded once. She was helping herself. My dad's jaw worked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't have the energy. He glanced back toward the courtroom doors like he expected Lindsay to burst out and correct the narrative. "She said you were unstable," he muttered. I almost laughed because it was so ridiculous hearing him repeat her line, now that it had failed in public. "I'm stable enough to file an FTC report. Freeze my credit, show up to court on time, and hand a judge a timeline," I said. "If that's unstable, then I guess we should all be terrified of office supplies." My dad flinched like the sarcasm stung, but he didn't deserve comfort right then. Sloan gave me a small look that said, "Good. Keep it clean." Over the next few weeks, the appropriate channels did what courts don't do in front of an audience. The probate attorney requested additional documents. The bank followed up on the fraud case. I was asked for copies of my reports, my screenshots, my confirmations. The boring stuff, the real stuff. Lindsay tried to call me twice. I didn't answer. She texted, "Can we talk?" I replied, "Communicate through counsel." She texted, "You're destroying the family." I replied, "You filed in court. You did that." Then I blocked her. I changed my passwords. All of them. I set up my own alerts with my own email and my own phone. I set a PIN with the bank. I placed an extended fraud alert on my credit. I kept my reports in a folder labeled, "Do not make me use this." I found another apartment, a smaller one than the first. The property manager approved me after I explained calmly that my credit was frozen due to identity theft, and I had documentation. I brought the documentation. Paperwork is a language landlords understand. When I got the keys, I didn't feel like I'd won a war. I felt like I'd shut a door. My mom left a voicemail one night crying softly. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't see it. I didn't call back right away. I listened. I saved it. Not as ammo. As a reminder, people will believe the loudest voice until the quiet one brings receipts." The last time I heard Lindsay's name was when the probate attorney emailed the accounting request and copied both sides' counsel. It was a clean email, no emotion, just lines and numbers and requirements. That's what ended it. Not shouting, not revenge fantasies, not some dramatic speech in a parking lot. A spreadsheet, a log, a court order. Peace for me wasn't a feeling, it was a system. And once I built it, Lindsay couldn't talk her way through it anymore. Thank you for taking the time to watch the entire video. I truly appreciate you being here. If you'd like to see more family revenge stories, real family drama, and revenge stories where the evidence and truth come out, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story.